I'd like to throw this open as well. I mean, anybody can ask a question at any point, so if you feel you can want to join in the discussion, then please feel free to do so. Oh, yes, carry on.
I get the feeling that
Sorry, can we just wait for the microphone?
Emilia Moisio from Botnia. I get the feeling that people may think that when the burning of wood is green in a way, and now we are discussing about the certification. Should we have introduction of certificates in the burning of wood? I don't know who.
There's a question.
Out of my league.
Jim.
I'm not going to sit on the steering committee.
Yeah, I mean, heaven only help us if we get down to that level. We've seen all logos for virtually everything, and we're just going to confuse the market even further and even further. This has got to be sensible. And I remember a number of years ago going to a meeting in London as carbon was starting to take off, and it was a number of effectively consultant companies who'd got together, and they were looking at the possibility of creating a logo for carbon neutrality, and they tentatively labelled it the Carbon Stewardship Council. And I thought this is really getting out of hand, because when I got into this industry sort of 20 odd years ago, a lot of the demand was coming from customers, NGOs. They were creating the demand for things like FSC. We're now at the point where it's seen as a commercial tool to create a logo, create a standard, something which can be sold out that industry will then have to follow. And that's where it's seen at that point. I thought at that point it's getting a little bit ridiculous, where actually it's consultancies who are generating logos and standards which will then be sold to the industry.
Interesting. Marco.
Hope it works, yeah. Sorry to disappoint the panel, but to the question. European Commission will launch sustainability criteria for biomass for energy early next year.
Great.
And there's something good to say for it. It's called level playing field. A tree is a tree is a tree. When we have chain of custody, FSC, PFC, and whatever what, when the same tree is burned by an energy company, they should have the same. At least that's a very basic view. It's much more complicated when you get into the details, but the criteria will be there first quarter next year, equal to biofuel sustainability criteria as well. And they won't certify, because they would burn the certificate as well. But they'll have to comply with the rules.
Yes, sir.
Jacek Siwek, I'm Director of Sustainability and Stakeholder Engagement with APP Europe. If I may, I have a question to Jim. There are arguably a couple of ways of defining sustainability. One would be against the criteria that you were mentioning, answering the previous questions, and in your expose, centered around habitat, biodiversity, climate change. So more classical. I wanted to say narrow, but I don't mean it in kind of a pejorative way. Another way of looking at this would be to take a broader approach that would also take into account the economic and social aspects of producing countries, particularly in the developing world, as well as their both economic and social aspirations for the future. Now, I know that it's very difficult and it's probably impossible to give a short answer. Perhaps we can continue the discussion during the break or over the dinner. But could you start commenting on where do you think we, and I don't mean the industry, but we as the world community should try to strike the balance between these two approaches?
Right. Well, that's a big question. But I would say, you know, one thing that, I don't know if you want to know what we're doing, sort of we as the NGOs are doing, we created FSC. And FSC allows campesinos and indigenous peoples and people from, you know, all over the world to enter a market and sell their products, and they're doing that very successfully with that logo. And we're really proud of you know, what we've been able to do in helping people get those products out. Now that, I think that level of production where they're doing they're cutting the wood, they're managing the forest, they're creating the product right there in local communities. I think that's a great model, and it creates great products that people love. And so I think that's the wave of the future. It's not, you know, industrializing the island of Sumatra, for example. turning it into a massive plantation. That's not a good thing for people. When people have to be kicked off their land, when people depend on products from those forests, that's not a good way of doing it. So I think there are two possibilities here, and we want to see everybody flourish. And there are good solutions and bad, and huge industries totally taking over massive areas of land where there are already people is not a really good option.
Okay. Anybody else would like to comment on that? Larry, you did mention about the emails that come out with the environmentally, you don't print this out because you're killing a tree or whatever. Two Sides has done something really quite proactive on that front. So, Martin, could you just tell everybody what how that's been going on that front?
Yes. Well, one of the aspects of the campaign is to have a practical response where we see these bits of misinformation, and I think everybody must get in their email or in their post, don't print this, it's bad for the environment. And we got really quite angry it was in the UK where it started, in getting bills. I can remember one, it was from British Telecom, saying save pounds and trees, do your bit for the environment and move to paper-free billing. And we were responding to one or two of these things as we saw them, because remember, every day hundreds of thousands of consumers are getting these messages, and what does it say? It says paper's bad, printing's bad, stop using it, not whether it's a magazine, a newspaper, a book, or whatever. So we started to tackle one or two, and that was very time consuming. Eventually we did some research, and I don't have the figures in front of me, but something like out of 110 major utilities, banks, telecoms, and utilities, we had about 55–60% of them were delivering the same or variations of the same message. So we actually wrote to them, the CEOs, the heads of their legal departments, and we were very nice. We ramped it up in stages, but ultimately we said, if you don't stop using these messages, we're going to report you to the Advertising Standards Authority, because it is greenwash. Unless you have evidence, and that is the case, unless you have evidence to prove what you're saying, you can't say it. I mean, you may be right, you may be wrong. I think there's sufficient evidence around that it's borderline in many respects. Whether it's better to have something electronically or in hard copy, it depends on so many things. But quite frankly, they couldn't say it. And I think we had, at the end of it, 89% of all these companies changed their messages. They said sorry. It was an invention of the marketing department. It's so easy to associate doing something better for the environment in order to sell a product. And that's greenwash, and we have to stop it. And it's still prevalent out there, not just with those companies that want to do it because they've just got their messaging wrong, but also I think there's a company in the US, Pay It Green, that's a sort of an umbrella organization for all things electronic communication, document storage, retrieval, who just blatantly keep telling the message. If you go over to electronic systems, it's definitely better for the environment. And the fact is, well, the word is not necessarily. And they shouldn't be saying it. So we have a constant battle with that, and we're trying to ramp it out in other European countries. We'll be doing it in the US. It's important that everybody plays their part in that. Don't let it go. In the past we've sort of got, oh dear, another bad message. But you can tackle it. And we must tackle it.